Mark, welcome to the show. Super excited about this. Let us know, what do you expect anybody that's watching the show is going to get out of it from your story?
Thank you for having me on the show, Joe. We live in a world these days where we are always told from the left and the right, we can't do this, we can't do that, right? I came to this country when I was 18 years old with $83 in my pocket. And the country is so great and the opportunities here are so wonderful that it allowed me to get out of homelessness, to get degrees in computer science and mathematics, masters in IT, became an engineer, became a professional consultant, started my own business. During all of that, lost myself sometimes into food and alcohol, fixed my life from obesity at a 41% body weight, now a nationally qualified bodybuilder. I'm a podcaster, I'm a business coach, I have a coming out on me, I have a TEDx coming up in December. All of this is not to say how amazing I am, but it is to say that if a little nobody like me who was homeless could do this, anybody's got a shot.
It's an incredible story. So there's so much in there we're going to get to talk about. One of the things that I think everybody needs to understand is you came here, you said $83 in your pocket, and you were only 18 years old, and you managed to overcome so many different obstacles to get to where you are right now. What is it that was going on in your head that kept you going forward?
Two things, one is naivety and two is I need to survive. Growing up is just an ever increasing process of learning not to dream anymore because everybody tells you that this is not possible, that is not possible.
Right.
So when I look back at my life, and even when I look at my life now, it's naivety that keeps me going. It's my superpower. Now, I don't want to know how hard something is or is perceived to be. I want to try it. And the second thing is survival. We need to survive. Whether you're homeless or want to build a business, you need to learn to fight and want to stay just one more day, I want to do this. And that just keeps on going.
So you're thriving off of primal instincts, basically.
Yeah.
So the naivete, there's being naive here. It sounds simple. Yet you were being thrown these obstacles. What allowed you? How'd you get over those things? Like, what was your mindset that said, I can just keep going?
Failure just was not an option, and I know that sounds so much more of a bravado statement. But in reality, when survival is what you need, failure is really not an option. And that means just going, like I said, like just another day. If I don't have any food, if I don't have a place to stay, what can I do the next day? And really, the biggest lesson that I learned in life is that there is no such thing as a lone wolf. In reality, even though we want to fantasize lone wolves fighting the war and doing the thing, in reality, in the real world, lone wolf dies because wolves are pack animals. So what helped me was really talking to other people, communicating with other people, telling them about the challenges I'm facing, offering them something in return for their help, and then just stacking on top of each other. And whether you want to learn how to tie your shoelace or build a rocket that goes to the moon, somebody knows how to do it. So you just be open and honest, want to learn and give something in return, and you figure it out.
It seems so simple. I'm in the world of real estate agents and real estate, and there are so many agents that want to hold tight to what they're doing. Yet the reality is there are no secrets. If they're doing it well, we can all see it. So when you're in your world, you started out in the tech world. Is that where you started getting your mentors and growing up with what you're talking about?
Even before the tech world, there was a time in life I didn't have a place to live, and I would go to churches just to get a free meal. I'm being 100% honest. And you go to enough churches and you sit there and you listen to the message and you build a relationship with pastors and priests. Those are my first set of mentors, because you're a boy who's just confused, can't go home, and you don't want to fail. And who's going to mentor? Like today's world, like there's podcasts and YouTube, and this is, that wasn't around when we were growing up, So yeah, those mentorships came from anybody and everybody who knew more than me and did more than me. And it was everybody at the time around me because I had done nothing.
So was that so many people want to protect themselves? Or is it just, again, it was coming from survival, your primal instinct to survive? You had to communicate.
Yeah. And it's also about not having any ego. The tiny little bit of life that I've seen and whatever I've accomplished, I still try to live my life as if I really haven't done anything, because ego has never served me or anybody else in my life. If I don't know how to do something, I will be open and honest and say, I need help. And if somebody else comes to me and says the same thing, it doesn't matter what is the person's stature, prince or a pauper, I will do the same. So the desire to want to close ourselves up and pretend we are something that we truly are not and suffer in silence is just a result of ego.
Yeah, well said. So you're living in churches, getting fed through churches, homeless. How did you go and get even through high school? Never mind getting into college.
Yeah, so I graduated high school in India, and I came over here after 18.
Okay.
So, believe it or not, the church that I was staying at, the pastor, there were 2 pastors, Linda and Margaret. We had built enough of a relationship, and they had seen me. I don't know what they had seen in me, to be honest with you. They had seen something in me that out of the graciousness of their heart, they wanted to help me, and they paid for 2 semesters of my tuition as a loan. And at the time, there was no guarantee that I would pay that back because I was just a kid, right? But they believed in me and they did that. And that got me started. Over the years, there were other people who came and gave me personal loans for God knows what reason, with no strings attached, knowing that they're just pouring money into this foreign kid, you know, who they don't know about. But I guess that was the destiny that God had for me. And all I could do was never to fail those who showed faith in me. And, that's how I got started.
What is it you think they saw?
I've asked that questions a lot of times, and it's hard to talk about it without bragging about yourself, right? Making yourself seem virtuoso. But if I had to guess, probably tenacity, probably the willingness to not give up, probably just fighting. You know, if you had an employee and you're in real estate and you see your sales guy really, from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., calling leads, doing all the things that he can do, you are more willing to help that person than somebody who clocks in at 9, clocks out at 5, and complains about the leads that they're getting. Right. So I think the amount of work, the amount of tenacity we bring in, not just on a single day, but every day, it says something about ourselves. And perhaps for those who are watching, they appreciate that and are willing to help them a little bit.
Yeah, there's so many people that throw up their own roadblocks and their own excuses when it's not necessary. Just do the work. It is
It really,
so tech, you got into the tech world. What was that like once you graduated and started working?
I became an engineer because, again, out of naivety, I thought I would be able to build all these cool solutions, right? Because when you're a software engineer, you're like, I'm going to build this, I'm going to build that, not realizing the structure of corporate world. You go in and you just, like hamster on a wheel, and you're just building things that you are told to build. But again, out of naivety, I thought, oh, if I just got promoted to this level, I will have the independence to build real good solutions. Or if I just promoted to this level. So years went by until I reached the top of the corporate ladder, answering to C-level executives and still building things that I didn't believe in. And as at that time, I was like, okay, this bubble has burst. I realize now how the real things are. I want to I want to go into business for myself. But believe it or not, I wasn't this version of me. I was an extremely shy and introverted kid. They don't teach you communication classes in math and computer science classes. And on top of that, because of my experience being homeless, I just learned to be quiet. So I had to realize that if I want to go into business, I need to learn sales and marketing. And sales and marketing starts with being able to talk. So as somebody who came from nothing, I have a superpower. I'm not afraid to go back to nothing. I quit my 6-figure job and I joined sales.
Wow. So what at that point, because this is where I am in my world with real estate agents trying to figure out, get to the next level up. Wow. How did you recognize that you hit the top and you weren't satisfied? Was it this oppression or was it just like, hey, this just isn't working. I got to move on.
When you have sacrificed so much in your life, you're not happy with just the bare. I could have been an engineer in India. I mean, half the country's either engineer or doctors. That's the joke, the two professions there, right? Why did I have to give up my family, come over to this country, be homeless in Pennsylvania in the middle of the winter, and do all these crazy things just to be at a job where I'm building things I don't care about, answering to people that don't have morals or ethics for a paycheck? I don't need that paycheck. I need something more out of life.
And how did you figure out that it was going to be sales?
Naivete. I watched
There
some
we go again.
movies. I watched some movies and that said, you really want to learn how to communicate with people. I read some books from Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar. And you can't learn how to swim by reading a book on swimming,
That's right.
right? You can't learn how to sell by reading a book on sales. So I really have to immerse myself. But it was very scary because I'd finally, quote unquote, made it. For a homeless kid to be making 6 figures in his early 20s, to go back to that, it was really scary. And I would like to tell you the story that I was so brave and so this and so that. It wasn't, you just came and you kind of figured it out. I told my wife at the time, if I didn't make it in 1 year, if I couldn't cut it for 12 months, I'll come back to engineering. And that's how I got started.
That's great. And what was your turning point in that 12 months? How long did it take?
It took me about 3 years. Once I got in my third year, I was top 1% in the country.
Nice.
But at about the 7th or 8th month, I knew I was starting to crack the code. I was making enough money to sustain. Thankfully, my wife had a job and we had a little bit of savings. So right around the 7th or 8th month, I was like, okay, I'm starting to figure it out.
Yeah, and you went from being the shy guy to now selling top 1% eventually in the 3rd year. What were the mechanics that got you to be able to speak to people and knock on doors and ask for the business?
Yeah. So, I did phone sales. I never had to go actually knock on doors. I did work on a car lot for a little bit, but most of my experience was phone sales. And, when I joined the company, it was like 1,000 people on the phones and it was a revolving door. And, you have sales trainers who are teaching the same exact methodology in the classroom and they're trying to jam everybody into speaking a certain way.
Right,
And I'm just telling you the truth for anybody listening to this who's been in sales, a lot of the sales roles, it's a bro culture. Talking about football and this and drinking and that and partying and golfing. I didn't do any of that. I didn't have early 20s or even my teens because I was just trying to survive. I couldn't, even today, I couldn't talk to you about football or anything, and I couldn't speak like them. So I went through this process of like, I'm never going to be able to make it because I'm just not like them. But at some point, I started noticing a pattern that they couldn't do certain things that I could do. I had an engineer mind. So my mind was about problem solving, which in the sales is overcoming objections.
right.
So I became really good at looking for objections as opposed to other salespeople avoiding objections and skirting past them. That's when I realized I have something. I realized that while I do not have the slickness of my other sales friends, I did have the ability to go deep, and when I talk, people listen. Those were the founding pieces. And I said, can I build something on top of this? And so I did.
Yeah, that's outstanding. So you were very self-aware. I imagine you kinda had to be in the situations you were in. So you seem very self-aware, obviously you are now, and you seem to be all the way through that. When you're learning those scripts and you're handling those objections, what turned you on? Like, how'd you, start to understand that being yourself was a better solution? Did you start seeing more closings? More sales?
Even before closings and sales, just the relationships I were building with people. Because, we had about 1,000 reps on the floor and each team had between 15 to 18 reps. And we would go to lunch and we would all talk about, man, this person hung up on me and that person is not closing and da da da. And I would always like sometimes because we're all trying to help each other, right? Learn together and help each other. And I would ask questions to my friends, on my team. Well, what did she say when you say that? Or what did he, okay, so she gave you this objection. What did you say? And they never had the answers. And I realized they were only digging to a surface level. And therefore, the relationships they were building were not deep enough. I know it's a cliche to talk about relationship in sales, but really that's where the key lies. So
Absolutely.
when I would get on the phone with somebody, I'm spending an hour and a half, not because of some tactic, because I'm truly, genuinely interested in understanding what is the problem? What have you done? What are you doing? They weren't doing that. So even before the results came, I knew I was onto something because people would call me back and they want to talk to me. This was not happening with anybody else. So I had something.
Right. Yeah, so that's very similar to a lot of sales agents who are being taught those scripts. They get on the phone, they're talking to somebody who just clicked on a lead online, and they're all about how many bedrooms you want, why are you moving, are you already pre-approved, what kind of money you spent, and they get into the mechanics of it, and they don't actually build a relationship or ask for an appointment. They end up just selling scripting, and the ones that are able to convert like you have done to more of a conversation where you're actually caring and listening, which
Yeah.
sounds like you have great listening skills, real listening skills. That's when the transformation happens. They start to actually listen and like you said, care, which is
Care.
true.
I remember in the year 2012, I was living still in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you haven't been to Pittsburgh, it's very cold. It's a very cool city, but it's very hilly. And some of the roads, because they are old roads, they have preserved it like how it used to be, like concrete blocks. So when it snows and sometimes when it ices, the car slides. I remember one time I was coming down a hill and I was driving a 2012 Nissan Versa. The brakes won't work, and I was coming down at a key stop. Like so, if the brakes didn't work, I'm gonna get like T-bone right on the back. Panic, handbrake, nothing. I slid into the bushes. That very moment, I was like, I need to buy an all-wheel drive car.
Yeah.
I could have just died. And I kid you not, Joe, I went back home. I told my wife, I don't care what the finances look like right now. We need to buy a new car because it's my life and your life. And I took the checkbook and I went to a Subaru dealership because at the time I thought Subaru was the best car. And I kid you not, I walked into the dealership with a checkbook with a full intent to buy. And the salesman sold me out of not buying the car. And this is the time I was in sales. So like watching other people, because oh, what car do you want? I don't know, looking for something safe. Never asked why safe. What does safety look for you? Like just showing me how much trunk space you have and how fast the car can go. And I'm like, you literally could have asked me 5 questions about why I need the car, really got into the deep of it. I would have paid for the car with cash. So those little things, sometimes as salespeople, we have to put ourselves in the other shoes and experience our lives through the eyes of a barista and a waiter and this and that. Understand what could have made my experience better? And then you reverse engineer it. You put that into your protocol and how you deal with people.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So you're the top 1% in your company,
Yeah.
and that doesn't fulfill you anymore.
It's not that it didn't fulfill me anymore. It was just that I thought I could now take my tech knowledge to the next level. Before that, I was an employee. I was going to, programmer, analyst, senior analyst, project manager, program manager, but I was still an employee. So I wanted to go S Corp and I wanted to be my own consultant. So I said, okay, well, I have all these great technical skills, right? Now I know how to sell and market. I can become my own consultant and I can do that. So I went back to New York City, the city that broke me down, right? I remember back in the day when I was in New York, literally looking for work during the financial collapse. Nobody was hiring even under the table cash employees. And I remember sitting there and looking at guys like walk into this building with the slick suits. And I don't know if it's the naivety or whatever it is. It was just like, dude, I want to do that someday. So when I finally thought I had figured it out with all my tech skills and all my sales skills, I'm going back to New York. So I went back to New York and I became a professional consultant. And for a little bit, life was amazing. To live in Midtown Manhattan, to be one of those people that I admired, making more money than I could ever imagine. Unimaginable life, Joe. I'm just telling you.
That's great.
But that sort of starts wearing off when you realize that you're still just answering to people at a much higher level, right? At Fortune 100 companies and still just building things that don't make sense. You're going to meetings all day long and just listening to things, know that, yeah, we're not going to do any of that. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But, we just have to say yes because he's important. So I did that, became a professional consultant for many years. And then I was like, well, now I truly have to start something of my own. And that's when I started my business.
Okay. So here you are and that's the business you're currently in right now, correct?
Yeah, it has expanded, but yeah, it's the same business.
Okay. So what is it you're doing right now for people?
Yeah. So just like everybody else, when we look at life in retrospect, everything is so obvious, isn't it? But
Yeah.
when we're moving forward, you don't know where you're going. So at the moment when I was going to stop being a consultant and I wanted to start my business, I asked the question everybody else says, what do I know that others don't? And the irony is, despite having doing whatever I had done, I thought I knew nothing, right? It's what everybody feels. And then it dawned on me, I did do one thing that many can't. I went from that shy, introverted kid to being the one salesperson without memorizing scripts,
Right.
being slimy and unethical, having deep relationships. I said, there's got to be people out there just like me, engineers, tech-minded, want to start their business, just miss the sales and marketing skills. That was the niche. So my first program was the Authentic Selling Accelerator, and it still is the country's only sales program that does not teach you using a sales script. You never memorize a damn thing. That's how it got started. And I got a lot of clients in the tech world, slowly expanded over online business owners. You're a dentist and you want to do something online. They don't know how to sell, right? So starting that, and that's how the company expanded.
That's fantastic. So any type of industry, you're helping people be authentic salespeople.
Correct. Because without sales, you don't have a business.
Right. Is it one formula fits all? Or when you're speaking with somebody, do you have to tweak it to their personality?
It's completely about personality. Because listen, part of the reason I think that sales is so difficult is because we don't have the time or the effort as management to be able to individualize everybody's personality to a certain style, right? It's just not possible. But when you're doing small scale like me, when you're taking a high ticket client bringing in, you can understand their style. You can understand what do they like talking about? What do they not like talking about? What makes them uncomfortable? And you can curate a process around those objections to help them bring out their natural self on a call so they don't feel like an imposter. That's what most salespeople feel like. They feel like an imposter. And you can only be an imposter for so long until you quit. right?
Right.
So really there isn't a single trick in the book. It's understanding what are you good at, really putting the time in and pulling the best bits out of you.
When you finally figured that out, it must have felt like things were just like interlocking and clicked in. What did it feel like inside? Like your vision of the future and how you felt aligned with what's going on.
I just felt really happy for my clients. Even now, if when my clients they make a sale, I make them message me. I do this boom, like just stupid stuff. Right? Everybody knows Mark is the boom guy because I'm like boom.
Yeah.
Just genuinely feel happy because most of my clients, I remember the first time I got on a phone with them, and they said, "I have a great product. I believe in my product, but I can't make a dang on sale because I'm not a salesperson." And I remember the sense of despair that I saw in their eyes. And I remember that because I was there. You know, when I joined sales, I was so miserable. I used to drive to work with a pencil in between my mouth because I read a book that said it'll make you feel happy. So in my yeah, because your face is like this the whole time.
Okay.
It
Right.
fools your brain into thinking you're happy. So my coffee, holder is chewed up pencils. It's funny now, but it wasn't at the time. I would be at a red light and I would have to take the pencil out because some idiot is looking at me like, what is he doing? What is wrong? So I remember, I never forget where I came from. I never forget how painful it was. So when they message me, hey, things are working. I made 1 sale, 3 sales, 7 sales. Like it's just feels so good.
Yeah. Another challenge you had mentioned and overcome came, and I'm sure it's always constantly working on it. You mentioned the weight problem. When was that you realized you had to kick into a new fitness method?
Yeah, going through sales, you develop some bad habits
Yeah.
because you're too young to understand how to cope with stress in a healthy way. I'm just being honest, at least for me. I started smoking, I
Well,
started drinking, I started eating, going into consultancy. It was the same. Your big clients, big meetings. I mean, this is the lavish Manhattan life. You take your clients out, your $1,000 bill on wine and food. You're just getting fatter and fatter. Moving over and starting your own business. Well, it's not any less stressful.
right.
But I always thought, well, I'll figure it out because these things slowly creep up on you, right? You don't realize how far you've gone until you've truly gone far. And for me, that moment was when my son was born 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
I was at a 41% body fat at the time. And I remember holding him in the hospital and really feeling like, yeah, this kid's going to grow up without a dad, like I grew up without a dad.
Wow.
Only because I can't put the sandwich down. Not because I went to war and died for the country or something, but simply because I can't stop eating. And as entrepreneurs, we're nothing but obsessive. We have a target. And so July 27th, 2022 was my first day in the gym. And in a year and a half, I went from a 41% body fat to a 5% body fat. I won every single bodybuilding competition.
Ooh.
I went to national championships last year. I came in sixth. This year, I'm currently on a bulk. And starting August, I'm going to go on a cut. I'm going to go back to nationals. And hopefully we'll win this dang on thing.
That's incredible. Wait, so you were starting a business and you dropped 36% of your body fat all within at the same period?
Yeah, between July 27, 2022 and my first day on stage was April 14, 2024.
What was your regimen like? How often were you at the gym? That's
Just 1 hour a day.
1 hour a day.
Yep. 5 days a week. Now I have a secret sauce that I have learned over the years.
Okay.
When you want to learn something and you want to do something fast, you don't DIY it. So when I realized that I need to do this, I hired experts because I didn't know diddly squat. And if I was going to watch YouTube videos to learn how to do this, it would be like watching YouTube videos to learn how to sell. You're never going to get there. So there are little nuggets that have totally changed my life that when you truly want to accomplish something, put the money in and get an expert. And then all you have to do is just follow the steps. And I know I can follow the steps. If I'm looking in the mirror and I'm telling myself that if somebody gave the steps and I still couldn't follow it, I don't have any hope for anything. I at least have to believe that I can do the steps. So that's what I did. I hired some experts and I worked really hard, but I did what they told me to do. And after that, it was pretty simple. And when you look at life through that lens, everything is pretty simple.
Was your intention when you started out and step foot into the gym, was it to compete?
Not at all. But as I kept going through this process, I was like, how far can I go? It's just like when you start a business, you're like, I just want to be independent and I just want to not have a job. And then you crack 6 figures and high 6 figures and 7 figures. You never get to a point where like, it's good enough. You just like, how far can I truly push? And I was getting so much success in the beginning. It was like, okay, I just want to do one show. So I can say I went to a show. I went to the show and I won the show. I was like, can I do another show? Can I drop later? And later, it's like, okay, what do we have to do to qualify nationally? It just kept on coming, and just like life.
That's incredible. So you never stop. So where are you going next? Like what you mentioned where does this journey take you next?
Yeah. So, the company evolved into something bigger. And now the company, we have rebranded to call it Peak Performance World. And the way I'm looking at life is in very simple terms: making money, being fit, being a badass. And I think if we can do these three things, we have accomplished everything in life. So the company has now evolved in a place where we teach peak performance in business, sales and marketing, right? So if you're an entrepreneur who wants to get bigger, we put you through those programs. But then also, there are entrepreneurs who have quote unquote made it and are basically at the same place where I was a couple of years ago. Hey, I've made all this money, I'm successful, but I don't like the man I see in the mirror. I don't like the woman I see in the mirror.
Okay.
They have the money, they have the time. I want to be a badass. I want to get fit. So these are the two different angles that the company is going, but it's all about the perfect entrepreneurial life. Because when you are young and you want to be an entrepreneur, and when you visualize yourself, you don't visualize yourself as a 45% body fat,
No.
right? You visualize
Mm.
yourself still as young and healthy and vibrant and money and creating an impact. So trying to bring that vision back, because maybe there are other people who are teaching the same things, but I just never found one and I got lost. So there's got to be other people who are getting lost, and maybe I can help them somehow through my own journey.
That's outstanding. What you're doing is incredible, and it is so authentically you. You must wake up bouncing out of bed every day.
I do most days. Some days I wake up with pain because I'm going to be 40, and this is not a 40-year-old game. When I was on stage for nationals, I kid you not, I was looking at the guys next to me. I was like, I could literally be your dad. If I would have started young, having kids, I could literally be your dad. But it's fun. It's fun to push. It's fun to have something impossible and just do everything you can to make it happen. We talked about that. It's called Iron and Soul, Iron in the gym and the soul. And as part of that, it's following my life and my story, but we're also collecting some other people, who have also gone through some insurmountable challenges, and the gym has changed them. So
That's
literally before talking to you, I was on a casting call with as a gentleman I was interviewing. We were interviewing as a team, and this gentleman had a stroke when he was 26 some years old, had a normal life before then. And after the stroke, three separate doctors said, yeah, you're going to be a vegetable for the rest of your life.
wow.
And today he has slurred speech. He cannot walk properly. He cannot function as a normal, quote unquote, normal being, but he's no longer a vegetable.
Wow.
He goes to the gym 5 days a week.
That's
He
awesome.
works out 5 days a week. And that's what I'm talking about.
My goodness.
That insurmountable. And how many of us make a New Year resolution to do something and in 2 weeks we quit? And here's a person who the doctor said, you're going to be a vegetable. I mean, the story is incredible, but that's what fuels me. And, just like you and me and everybody else in the world, life sometimes gets hard and we sometimes self-pity ourselves. And I'm so lucky to have surrounded myself with people like this who are badasses, so that when I start self-pitying myself, I look at others and I'm like, what the heck am I doing? I got to get going.
So let's ask about your wife and your son or daughter, son. What they must be huge fans. They can't not be if you're doing all this. How do they get incorporated in this? What's their life like in all this? What's their play, I guess?
I always say this thing: I don't know how many right things I did in my life, but one sure thing I did absolutely correct, which is married the right girl.
Right.
And I wouldn't be here without her categorically, because in many situations, I could be seen as the madman. Yeah, only a crazy person quits a 6-figure job and gets into sales when he can't say 2 words in front of a crowd. Even a crazier person quits a 7-figure consulting job to start a business on a whim. An even crazier person is 41% body fat, has trouble walking up the stairs and thinks, I could be a bodybuilder. So you need somebody who truly believes in you. And I have that in her. Now, that being said, the process is not easy for her
Yeah.
because she has to put up with all this craziness. But that's life. She supports me in every way I can. I think she is my greatest cheerleader. My son, he's 3.5 now. He'll be 4 in October. And I know there will be a day when I'm gone.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't have any family. I have a distant uncle in New York City. I don't have any other family in this country. And sometimes I wonder, how is it going to be like for him when his
Right.
parents are gone? Because there was a time when I was so alone. And if I could just leave some stories, some photos, some videos of some accomplishments that I did. So in his deepest, darkest time and nobody's around, he can look at those and say, if my dad did this, I could, who can do this because I come from him. That's the dream, Joe. That's what we're trying to do.
That's fantastic. Well, you certainly already created quite a bit of material for them. But let me ask you about all these people that have supported you along the way, starting with the two people at the church. Are you still in touch with them? Do you stay connected with the people that have lifted you up and helped you get to where you are?
Absolutely. I would take a bullet for them. And the beauty of life, and also the most unfair thing in life, is that you can never repay them. I've always said this story, if I'm wandering in the desert and I'm dying of thirst and somebody gives me a glass of water and saves my life, I can't come back and say, here's a glass of water back. We're even.
That's right.
Because the glass of water has changed its meaning. So the littlest thing that people do for us when we are down, the only thing we can do is show gratitude and be there for them for the rest of our lives, because we wouldn't be here without them.
You are passing that glass of water on to a lot of other people, which is
Trying, just trying.
that's fantastic. What would you tell yourself, 18-year-old, when he came over to this country? What would you tell him right now? What was he thinking, and what would he believe what you accomplished?
I used to be, I still am to some level, but it was worse before. I obsess over the details, and I really would like to tell that person to just do the work and not worry about the outcomes will come on their own. When I was 18 years old, sleeping on a bench, sleeping in a church, I would never know that I would be on the Real Joe show talking about a documentary and bodybuilding and this. Like, you couldn't even come up with that in a fairy tale.
Right?
With the craziest imagination you won't. So what I tell myself now and what I would tell definitely that person is just stop obsessing over the details so much, and just do the work. Results will come. And if the results don't come, pivot and try some other way.
Awesome. Stay naive.
Stay naive.
Keep going. I love it. Mark, this has been fantastic. Your story is incredible. Enough people are not going to watch this one. I know you're on a lot of other podcasts. You got a show coming out. Your word's getting out there. Your life is making a difference. Really proud to have met you on this, and I appreciate you coming on. The documentary, where is that going to be seen?
So right now we're talking to ESPN 30 for 30. So the film started shooting in December of last year, and it goes through to December of this year when there's nationals. So we are shooting all throughout the year. We're in the process of making a sizzle reel. That's what goes to ESPN 30 for 30, and we take it from there.
So no pressure on this upcoming contest.
Oh my God, don't even, you won't get me shut up for an hour.
Oh, cow. That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate again coming on. For you viewers, follow Mark, find him, stay inspired, and be your best and have fun.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.